Hey, this is Avante,
I'm Eli, and this is hosted by Posh.
an intimate series where we talk with the most influential people in the event space and hear about the movements they've built. All right, Andrew. So, you have no brand, no logo, but you're hosting events for over 10,000 people across New York, Miami, now even Austin, where I just saw you a couple weeks ago. How do you do it?
I'm working on my brand. It's not great. It's
Okay.
called Andrew's Mixers.
Okay.
I need to work on it. But to answer your question, how I started, really just the art of the cold DM, reaching out to a lot of people on like Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit. Because you guys know, like I moved here not knowing anyone, so that's how I made my first few friends, how I built my network, and leverage the art of the cold DM and sort of relationship building principles to meet the first like 100 people.
Interesting. And what was kind of the genesis behind wanting to meet those first 100 people?
Yeah, so a bit of background. So I've moved around all my life. So I was born in Hong Kong, moved to Taiwan, moved to Shanghai, moved to Canada. So I spent 20 years in Asia. And then I moved to New York City in 2020, and I didn't really know anyone. And it was in the middle of COVID, and I realized I had to make friends, build out my network, or I was just going to be very lonely. And that was really just the initial intention behind reaching out to so many people.
Really, really. And when did you decide you wanted to host events for those people?
Honestly, really the first month I was here, because I landed. I remember like the night I landed, I didn't have anyone here, and I reached out on a platform called Fishbowl.
Fishbowl.
You guys heard of Fishbowl?
No.
It's like a social media app for management consultants, and I wasn't even a management consultant.
How long ago? This is like several years ago?
This was 2020, August.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so like pretty recently, in the middle of COVID. And I met like two random strangers for drinks that night, because I was like, I just have to meet people. And like over the span of like the next few weeks, I started reaching out to more and more people, and then bringing them together through like dinners and happy hours and that sort of thing. And that's really how it started growing.
Wow. And then kind of how did it go from, a couple people, two people on Fishbowl to, I was at Williamsburg Hotel last summer going to Ragers. Then one day I wanted to go on a Saturday and I run into 1,000 tech people. And I'm like, what is this? So how did it go from, the genesis to where it was last summer and where it is now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think, like you said, I don't really have a brand, I don't have a proper website, a call to action, any of that stuff. But I really believe in the power of word of mouth. And so in those very early happy hours and events, I made sure those events ran really, really well. And what that means is the curation had to be on point. The vibes had to be on point. The setting had to be really good. And sort of expected them to go out there and tell them their friends and their community about what I was doing. And what started off as dinners and small happy hours quickly grew into like rooftop parties and tech mixers.
Wow.
Yeah, so let's dig into setting a bit. You've just gotten to New York. You don't have a ton of connections with local venues. When you're a brand new organizer to the New York market, how do you reach out to venues and secure them for an amazing event?
So I have a story with my favorite venue, and you guys have been to Junto. You guys have been to Junto Club. It's at the Citizen M Bowery Hotel rooftop, one of the nicest rooftops in New York City. When I first landed, I Googled like what are the nicest rooftops, and that was like first on the list. So
Why were you focused on rooftops?
Because I heard like the thing to do in New York City is go to rooftops, because there's so many skyscrapers here. I was asking like friends, I'm like, what do I do in New York City? They're like, go to the rooftops. So,
Yeah.
like I Googled rooftops, and that was like first or second on the list. And so I started going there like every week and like literally bringing like friends there, like new friends there, like dates. Like I brought my parents there like a few months down. And every time I went, I would treat the staff really well. Like I would tip them really well. I would get to know them, small talk with the GMs and stuff like that. And I did that over the span of like 2.5 years. And then one day I was like, it's time to like shoot my shot. So I cold emailed the chief commercial officer of the global chain. And I was like, hey, here's what I do. I throw events. They're kind of small, but here are the people that come, and here's the value I think it would bring to your hotel. And he was like, let's try it. We hopped in a call, gave me the venue for free.
Wow.
Free venue, beautiful venue for free. And to this day, they're my my partner, we do the monthly Junto Club there. And they actually just emailed me this morning. They were like, can you do like another event? Like, can you do a Thursday
That's
thing?
sick, dude, damn. So it's really just taking the leap.
It was taking a leap. I think it's learning how to build relationships over time and build trust. Like, he knew who I was because I had like back channeled with the GM, and I'm like, can you just tell him how dope I am?
Yeah.
If you think I'm dope. Like learning how to craft a really good message so that he understood the value prop and he understood what he was getting into.
Yeah, so all these things you're talking about, curation, like the vibe of the event, the setting. Avanti and I have been in numerous tech events, and they're usually very stuffy. Maybe they're in like some crowded VC office or a weird like conference room.
Yeah.
What made you think of separating the vibe of your tech events from everything else that's going on in the tech event scene? And how do you do it? Like, what's the secret sauce to making it feel really authentic and special?
It's a good question. Yeah, the secret sauce. When you think about like traditional networking events, like they're not fun. They're like people wearing suits. Name tags are cool. I like to think I've made name tags cooler, but they were never cool. And like people like shaking hands, it's awkward. And when you think about why that is, it's because the incentives are totally misaligned. And so most networking events, like the huge conferences, they're a vehicle for these companies to promote their brands and generate leads. And so they don't really have the customer experience in mind.
Sure.
And you guys are hospitality guys, like the space well. One of the books that really inspired me was Setting the Table by Danny Mayer, and he talks about the importance of a couple of things, but the main thing was focus on customer experience.
Yeah.
Get feedback and make sure end to end they have a great time even when they hear about the event and then when they get into the event and when they leave. So I made sure to just incorporate all those principles and made sure everyone was comfortable, happy, and productive in these events.
So give us an example of how you set the vibe at one of your earlier on events.
Yeah, so one of the things that's most important to me is connection. So at the smaller events, like the Junto Club, I collect information in an RSVP form. So I know exactly sort of who they are, why they're here, where they're from, and what they want to accomplish with their life. And then I take those things and I put people into curated groups of 10, and the Junto is like 100 people, so 10 groups of 10. And I encourage people to do email introductions in the chain. And the response rate for those, at the one I had last night, was really damn high. It was like 90%.
Wow.
So most of the people are proactively introducing themselves.
Yeah.
At the larger events, it's harder to do that because I can't send out 100 different emails. I just, maybe I get a VA or something, but it's just also I do this for fun, so it's not worth the time. But I do have volunteers. And at the really big events, I allocate 10% of the attendees to be volunteers. And they come early, they wear a yellow lanyard so everybody knows who they are. And they're trained to engage with the attendees that come alone, who are lonely, who are looking for something very specific. So that when you walk in, the first 10 minutes, it's not awkward, and you have a friendly face to speak with.
So you pre-seed those people within the space, and they come up to anyone that's new?
I plant people there. Yeah, I plant people there. And even at the one we did in Austin, there's a massive line around the block. I planted a few volunteers there to talk to the people in line. And it worked really well. Like one guy handed out 300 name tags while he was in the line.
That's so funny because you were really hyped about someone that came up to you with a yellow lanyard.
Yeah, it was really a fun experience.
Any crazy connection that you've seen made? Like, what was the first crazy connection where you're like, wow, I really gave some value to both these people and these events can do a lot?
The first crazy connection, as in an introduction or someone I've met?
An introduction between two people at the event you threw.
My favorite introduction is probably between you and Jake. So you guys are now doing business together, which is great. That was at Junto, right?
Yeah.
That's
Give
my
some
favorite.
background. And
Yes. So, I went to Andrew's Junto Club. It's like a very intimate event at the Citizen M rooftop. And essentially it's just for I don't want to, define the ICP or the kind of ideal customer or person that you're bringing, but essentially it's people that have high influence with that are doing something really cool in the, tech space in New York or just overall business space. And that can provide a lot of value to the other people in the community. So there I met Jake, who helped us put together this podcast and who we're working with very intimately now. That was literally just through just him coming up to me, us relating on a personal level about dance music, and then kind of exploring what each other did or what we both do. And it was a great experience. I definitely thanked you, for that and was really appreciative of that. So.
Yeah, and I was flattered because, I mean, you guys have a really high bar for events. You do so many events and you go to so many events, and you said something to me that to this day sort of sticks with me. It was something along the lines of, you spoke to a couple of people in the room, and every single person you met and spoke with had sort of high value and could give you an idea, could give you value in some form, business or sort of social. And that really stuck with me. Like, to this day, my mantra is to create a room where every single person you meet is a valuable connection, and it gets you itching for more.
Yeah, and I think it's something that's very interesting about the Junto Club, though, is that a lot of these other networking events feel so transactional. Even though, we ended up doing a transaction with Jake and other people I met there, I also started, talking to and working with potentially, or still may work with in the future. I think it didn't feel like it was so transactional in the moment. It was really just a matter of trying to meet someone and like really vibing with them on a personal level. And we ended up wanting to work with them just because of the nature of their attitude. But as opposed to other events where it's like, I'm a founder. Oh, you're not a VC? Okay, next person, right? Like, you're not gonna help me raise my Series A? Okay, like, next person, please. And there it was more just like, I don't really care what you do. I want to learn more about it, and they want to learn more about me.
Right.
And maybe even if I wasn't working directly with them, they had an introduction to someone else or something. How do you kind of mitigate, I guess the transactional nature in the larger events, like at Williamsburg Hotel and things?
Yeah, so how do I mitigate the short-term thinking so that people are thinking in terms of longer-term relationships? The first thing is the creation and bringing together the right people. And I think, when you speak with someone and when you get them to like fill out a form for your events, you can sort of sense what they're looking for. It's really interesting because when I went to San Francisco, it was very transactional.
Yep.
I did 2 events there, 1,000 people over the 2 events. And everyone was looking for investors. Like, literally, I did an after party after TechCrunch, and it was at a club with really loud music. And this person comes up to me and she's like, "Can you turn the music down? I'm looking for investors."
What?
It's 11 p.m. on a Friday night.
What's your initial reaction? Like, do you just smile back, or are you like,
I said
what the
no.
fuck?
I said no. And then she messaged on the Saturday app, and she's like, "Turn the music down," and I blocked her, or removed her from the app. So, yeah, the demographics, and that's a whole other conversation.
Was that shocking, or was that what you expect going to San Francisco and it's all tech snobby scene?
Well, I probably will never go back there.
Wow.
To be honest, like, I was pretty scarred.
That says a lot, though, that you're one of the leading people in the tech event scene and you don't even want to go back to San Francisco at all.
I don't. Yeah, I had a really bad experience there with it was awkward, and that my event was only 1,000 people, so like that's a tiny sample in a bigger picture. But yeah, the experience is weird and awkward, and I can't really put my finger on it on why, but I'm not going back. So.
But I've even been to events in New York that feel similar to that. So like, I guess we're still trying to get at like what that. I guess the volunteers, they make sense.
Right.
Do you think like you obviously have to approve people before they get accepted to your event, right? So like,
the small ones,
yes, like what is the main thing that you're looking for? I guess what defines someone that you would deny coming to your event?
Sure. So my criteria, and this is pretty broad, and we can dig into it more, but my criteria for people I invite to like the smaller, more intimate events is people who are brilliant, who have done fascinating things with their careers, and have incredible stories to tell, yet are still brilliant, still humble, and still eager to help other people out. And they're thinking through relationships through the perspective of, positive sum. It's not I take and you lose. It's more like we can create together. And I think over time you just sort of develop an instinct to sort of find these people. I think a lot of those people are in this room and are in our circle, but that not everyone is like that. And I think it just takes a bit of practice. And to answer your question, it's a bit of, I haven't really figured out how to express it, but you know it, I know it. And people will learn to develop it over time.
Yeah, for sure. So what, I guess, obviously you've been doing this very successfully for, over a year now, almost 2 years. What do you think, the Andrews Mixers of 2 or 3 more years down the line is going to look like? Are you going to have a landing page with the CTA? You're going to have a logo? You're going to have an LLC?
If Jake helps me make one. Yeah, have you seen my website?
I haven't, I have to say I haven't.
Have you seen it?
No.
It's embarrassing. But it gets the job done. I think.
Let's dive into that, though, because I think it's really fascinating. So Avante and I obviously have interacted with like hundreds of really big brands that are organizers, and it's rare that you come across an individual like yourself that's able to get thousands of attendees very easily. why are your attendees not concerned with the brand? And is that even the right way to put it, or is there like a brand that they know exists that is Andrew Yeung, but it's not necessarily tied to a logo or a website? It's more just the vibe that they know they're going to get when they go.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't come from the marketing world, so all the branding and go-to-market stuff as it relates to like marketing communications, that stuff is all really new to me. I focus on the product, which is the event itself.
Yeah.
And I think over time, like 90% of my focus has been making the events really damn good. And usually, if you think about like what makes an event good, it's really the people. You know, a lot of people think about events having like open bar and like a really nice venue, but some of the best events I've been to are just about the people, and they might actually be in an office space. It's the people and the context behind the event.
So user experience, people is number one. What are some weird nitpicky things that you focus on with the user experience besides that? Like, does the smell in the room matter?
Does the smell? Now I'm thinking about that. Doesn't it? It probably does. So let's take a really basic setting. So I think the lighting has to matter. Again, they don't matter that much. It's really all about the people. But the lighting matters, the music, how loud the music is, the venue, how far it is. I mean, these are logistical things. People are thinking, can I get there? What do I do after? Especially in New York City, where they're like back to back to back. Like if I do an event on a Thursday, I know they're going to be there for maximum like 1 hour before they leave to another event. So yeah, everything to do with like the venue, the environment, and the vibe matters a lot. The context matters a lot, and that's like harder to define what that is, but that's really like the purpose. Like, why do people go in the first place? What are they looking for? What are their intentions? What do they think they're going to leave with is a huge thing that people miss. But it really ultimately gets down to like the people you have in the room. People go there because of the people that they know are going to be there or that they're going with.
How early in advance of an event are you planning it? Are you messaging the venue, or are you trying to get these logistics in order usually?
Usually around 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
But I have done, in San Francisco, I did that after party in 2 days.
2 days.
So Wednesday, and Cliff, my friend Cliff, was like, you should throw a party on Friday. And I was like, okay. Messaged a few people, and it just, blasted it out on
Wait,
socials.
so 2 days.
2 days.
It's not just messaging people that gets 1,000 people there. What's the outbound strategy to get that many people there in that short of a time?
Oh, it's just message. It's email. Just email blast.
And do they forward it, or you're email blasting an audience that you already have?
Yeah, it's my so I have a newsletter, which is my website. So
Yeah.
my events website is my Substack newsletter.
Okay, so take us through like the whole
Yeah.
process. I've never heard of you before.
Yeah.
How do I potentially find out about you on Twitter, and then do I subscribe to the newsletter? How does that all work?
It's interesting because it's honestly a really disconnected experience, and this is what I get for, it's not my full-time job, so I'm just playing around with things. So there's a couple of ways how you can hear about my events. So one of them is my Substack newsletter, and I send that out really sporadically. Sometimes it's every week, other times it's every 3 weeks. My Instagram, at Andrew's Mixers, it's not huge, it's like 2,000 followers. I post events there. And then I have a Twitter. Twitter, I use Twitter a lot. So Twitter is a huge like lead magnet for the events. And then I have like LinkedIn and stuff like that. And then just regular email.
Something I've noticed that's really unique about your events, that especially a lot of the organizers in the more nightlife or dance music, hip hop, whatever it might be, spaces, is you have a lot of sponsors. And I think it's very difficult for a lot of these event organizers to find a sponsor and figure out what the value they're providing to them is, and to really reel them in. So I would love kind of your advice to a new event organizer of, what is the way to go about finding sponsors? How do you figure out what the right sponsor for your event is?
Right. Yeah. So my advice for new event producers that are looking for sponsors, I was mentioning cold emails earlier. So that's a huge thing. Like, learn the art of the cold email or DM. And to this day, like, I'm doing an event next Tuesday for 1,000 people. I sent out like 50 cold emails to alcohol brands and non-alcoholic brands as well, just to get them, involved. And that's like really just the art of like, how do you tell your story in a way that's concise, and then iterate the value proposition of what you're doing to them, so they're like, I have to work with this person, or I'm going to miss out. So that's one, like the messaging component. The other one is there's a certain aspect of like brand building, and I say that because a lot of my sponsors are inbound. actually most of them are inbound. I tweet and I'm like, I need a sponsor, and I'll get like 20 DMs of people wanting to sponsor. So I'm really fortunate I've done that. I can do that. But I think that's also the output of me building a brand on Twitter over time. And really the brand building, I think of personal brand building as you being really clear on what you believe on and what your mission is and what your values are, and then communicating them over time. And my form of communication is Twitter and email. And so people sort of know my values, and they know why I do the events for most part, and what they're going to get. So that expectation is set, and when people think about events, I think, at least in New York, they might think about me.
Totally. You're talking about all this planning you do, all these marketing tactics, but you said you still have a full-time job. We've met a lot of organizers that also have a full-time job. What's the balance like? Is it super stressful? Are there certain days of the week that you put towards the event planning?
So my full-time job is, I work in big tech. I'm a product lead, and that's like,
What company?
I work at Google.
Flex, nice.
Yeah. That's an average 40-hour, 50-hour a week job, and maybe sometimes it's more. But
most times it's probably less.
It depends who's watching. If my boss is watching, then it's more. But I'm always like working. I'm always doing stuff. So I'm probably working like 14 hours a day. And half of that is Google, and the other half is the events and the venture stuff and everything else. And then I'm working on the weekends too. So I'm always just like, well, it doesn't really feel like work because it's so fun.
Yeah.
So it's not, when work feels like play, you could play forever.
Hell yeah. That's dope.
And so, for just going back to the sponsors real quick, because I think it's really interesting. Like, what does that transaction look like, right? So you're cold emailing a sponsor to get involved. They're excited to get involved, and so what are they providing you, and what are you providing them in exchange, other than just like exposure or their logo on a flyer?
It depends on the sponsor. It depends on the size of the event, but typically, they will, they'll give me some money to cover the cost of the event, and maybe like food and beverage and that sort of thing. And in return, I will put their brand in the emails, and I'll give them like a small section where they can promote their brand and give a call to action. I never like sell email lists. I've never enjoyed doing that, and I never will. But the email comms is one. In the smaller events, I might offer a curated intro. So if it's like a Junto Club, and let's say there's a marketing agency that wants to sponsor me, and I know exactly the clientele that they want, I'll be like, hey, like these 5 people could be a good fit, and then I will double opt-in intro. Like, I think I've done some intros for you, so it's like the same sort of thing, where I will like proactively give them an intro.
That's really awesome.
You've talked a lot about the importance of people at your events. Where does gender ratio come into that? Is it super important?
It is. Diversity of gender, of background, of thought, of all those things. So at the, unfortunately at the larger ones, because it's harder to curate, it skews men, right? Like every other tech event.
That apply or that you accept?
The bigger ones, it's, I don't deny anyone.
Really?
Yeah, the really big ones. So anyone is welcome to come. Like
but aren't you curating who's there?
It still ends up being curated because I have different email lists that I know consist of different types of people. So that's a curation. It's not surgical curation, but it's on a high level. It's still curated.
Back end marketing side.
Yeah.
Are you single right now?
Yes.
How has you're like this man of interest within the NYC tech scene? Has it played into your dating life at all? Does it spill over?
So I'm on Hinge. My Hinge is like very plain. I don't say where I work, what I do.
Why do you need Hinge though if you're meeting all these people at events?
So I don't like dating the girls that come to my events because I'm going to do this long term, and honestly I think I'm just getting started.
Yeah.
I need to make sure I create inclusive environments for the people that come. And so I can't be like hitting on people that come and be like, can I have your, I have their emails, but I can't be like, will you go on a date with me? Because that just implies so many different things.
Have you ever encountered though, and maybe it's not just women, but any type of people where you feel like they're hitting you up on the side just to social climb and get into this elite circle you've kind of built up around these events?
100%, yeah.
What's your response to it?
I like to develop that. I like to think that over time I've developed a good radar for the type of people that I want to surround myself with. And again, that's hard to like define and hard to explain. But when someone doesn't sort of meet that bar, then I tend to not give them time.
What do you think about the concept of how the more exclusive an event is, the more people want to go, and like purposely creating some FOMO around an event?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Purposely creating FOMO. I've never intentionally done that, but I think I've accidentally done that on Twitter, where it's, I'll put a picture of a venue and I will be like, there's 100 people going, I have a few more spots. Engage with this if you're interested. But I've never like purposely done that.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. How do you see, obviously you said you want to do this for a long time. How do you see this evolving over the next year or two? It sounds like you've been throwing a lot of 1,000-person events. When are you getting into 5,000-person events?
Yeah, I can't see that far ahead, but I think for me, in the immediate term, in the next 12 months, I'm focused on a few things. And one of them is purpose in terms of being helpful to the people that come. And a ton of people losing their jobs right now. I want to help them out. A ton of founders are having a rough time raising money. I want to help them out. And so imagine if these folks come to the events, I want them to have fun and also to solve one of their pain points on a business level as well. So that's one, being more helpful and intentional. I have this itch for creating experiences that cannot be recreated. And so I'm working with like really unique venues and really unique performers and event producers to create things that are truly unique and like one of a kind. And so that's another sort of itch I'm scratching. And then as you've seen, like getting more curated. I have these really big, massive events, at the hotel rooftop. But I'm starting to do these like 50 to 100-person events that are a little bit more curated and intentional. So experimenting with that as well.
It seems like you really like those intimate events a lot more.
I like them. They're fun for me.
Yeah.
They're a ton of fun. Like the big ones are not that fun because like shit always goes wrong and you have to like put out fires, and also there's a ton of people who try to like pitch and sell me stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't really have fun with my friends, and my friends get pitched and stuff too. So the small ones are fun.
Right.
Yeah.
We kind of breezed over the fact that you traveled around Asia for 20 years, you said?
Yeah, 18 years to be specific.
Wow. Okay, so were you always the archetype of super social and the guy that was bringing people together? Or were you more the outcast and you had a chip on your shoulder and now you're like making up for that by being the social guy now?
Such a good question. So the question is, do I have a chip on my shoulder?
No, like were you always the events social guy that brought people together?
So I spent 6 years in Hong Kong, Taiwan 8 years, and in Shanghai 4 years. Every time I moved, I had to rebuild my community and my network and my people. And I moved to Canada in 2013. I didn't know a single person. My parents were still in China. It's less so I was like really social and had a ton of friends. It's more so I needed to learn how to meet people and bring them into my life, or I was going to be a lonely dude.
Wow. So community building is like your survival instinct almost.
I guess, yeah.
Did you ever host events before New York?
I hosted a few in Toronto,
Okay.
like birthday parties.
Birthday parties
Yeah,
for like
birthday
friends
parties.
and things?
Yeah, I always loved the idea of, for my birthday, I would bring a ton of people together. And, 1 year in Toronto, I did one for 100 people, which at the time seemed massive. And the intention was like, don't come to celebrate me. Like, come because you're all the brilliant and awesome people in my life, and I want you to meet each other. And to this day, that's still the mantra.
Really? And so do you think that your biggest personal goal with these events is just to provide value to the people in your community, or do you have any other ideas? Like, for example, if I was you, you have insane deal flow. And like I would be a VC, I'd go raise a fund. You have every startup in New York, LA, everything
Facts.
kind of, under your newsletter. Is there any other personal goal you have?
Maybe I should do that.
Yeah.
So the fun thing, I think a few people have told me that I talked to a few pretty senior investors, and it just doesn't sound fun.
Right.
It just really doesn't sound fun, and I have like the not so fun stuff already. Like that's Google for me. It's not super fun. That's my paycheck. So everything I do outside that has to be fun, and if it's not fun, I'm not going to do it. And where that is right now is the unique experiences. Really what it is throwing parties with really cool people that come to the parties. The other thing that's fun is, again, like I've said this, but like helping people and being helpful to folks who are struggling. And I do have a passion for like hospitality. So learning a bit more about the space. I'm working with a few hotels and like some festivals, and just learning more about how they think about things and how I can potentially provide some value to them.
do you think you'd expand outside of like tech networking events into more of a hospitality-driven sector?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, I could see expanding into like fashion.
Really?
Recently met a few like fashion people, just because like there's something interesting there. They do events with really good production quality, as I'm sure you know. So I want to learn some of those principles. And then the other space is just like general social events. I think a lot of people, I don't really know how to define my events. Like, are they networking? I don't really know. They're like this weird.
What did you see it as when you first went?
I think networking. Yeah.
Networking.
Yeah. For sure.
New York is interesting because there's the intersection of like professional and social, and it gets merged. And so a lot of New York events, you don't really know what's going on. Like, is this networking or not? Like, I think
the amount of alcohol there determines which side of the spectrum you're on.
That's a good signal. Yeah. Yeah.
Any dream brands or individuals in the space that you want to work with?
Any dream brands or individuals that I think I'd work with? So whoever is world class at doing events, and I haven't figured that out yet. Maybe it's like a Coachella. Doing something with them could be cool, or understand.
Like a tech lounge, or what do you do there?
I have no clue. I just want to learn from how they do it.
Nice.
I think like getting to know how, was it Billy McFarland, like Fire Festival, and getting to know his playbook, and then like never doing that would be a cool learning experience. So like inversion, like knowing like what to avoid. People, I don't know, like doing events has opened up a ton of doors for me, and it's given me access to like some of the most incredible people in the world. And so there's also an element to this that's personal, that's like, who can I meet?
So who's someone really special so far that came from doing the events?
Yeah, I don't want to say her name, but she is someone who is close friends with like Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Cook, and she has interviewed them and put them on screen. She's a really incredible person that I'm looking forward to learning more from. And then there's a ton of like co-founders of like the largest consumer apps in the world, writers, investors, that sort of thing.
That's really awesome. That's really dope. So, I mean, it seems like you almost might want to go into like the music route or something, or doing something more than just networking events. So, like, that's right? That's that true?
I love music. Yeah, I love music.
What kind of genres are you into?
So the guys before this were talking about Lane 8. That's my number one favorite artist.
Your number one artist.
Yeah.
Really?
Is there a sound for networking events that works best?
That's a great question. Is there a sound?
I don't know if you network to like orchestral music or some shit like that.
Yeah, I think Lane 8 is the sound of tech bros. I feel like that's just like the sound of SF.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, like melodic techno is what they call it, I guess. But I guess expanding outside of that, just like what's the music that you think that brings you happiness, brings you joy?
Melodic house.
Melodic house.
Anything that like puts me in some sort of trance, or some sort of flow when I can't, I don't think about anything else is cool.
Is there a flow state to networking?
When you have a really good conversation with someone and you're both fully present and immersed in it, like together in that moment, that's an incredible feeling of flow, one-on-one.
Interesting. I feel like the one problem I would say with like any of these events, like even Junto, is like, shit, there's so many amazing people in this room. I'm enjoying this conversation, but this event is only like 3 hours long. Like, what do you do in that scenario?
What would I do if I was an attendee?
Yeah. Or I'm sure you're talking to everyone there, right? You got 20 different people going, hey, Andrew, thanks for having me here. And you want to give them all the right attention.
Yeah, re-engagement strategy.
Right. Like, what do you do to juggle those relationships?
Yeah, most people at the Junto have really good self-awareness, where they're like, I know you're hosting, you probably have a lot in your mind, which I normally do. And there's like, I just want to say hi. I don't want to bother you too much. And I really appreciate that. In terms of how I re-engage with people, I have everyone's emails.
Yeah.
So normally I'll email some of the people that I want to get to know a little bit more. Yeah. That's like most of the people in Junto.
Yeah. But as an attendee, what do you suggest, right? I don't know everyone there.
Yeah.
I'm at your event. I just met Jake. I just met some other cool people.
Right.
I know there's 5 other people in my group and only 30 minutes left, and people are getting drunk and dropping like flies. Yeah. What do you do?
There are 2 things you can do. One is, and this works for any event, is you host a meetup before the meetup. So if there's Andrew's Mixers, whatever, Andrew's rooftop event, you tweet or you put on LinkedIn and you're like, who else is going? I am an investor who's looking to invest in a pre-seed consumer. If you're going, I'd love to connect with you. I'm actually hosting a small happy hour before. And then you host a meetup before the meetup, and you go together and you've met some quality people that are intentional quality people before the event.
And people are doing this right now.
Some are.
Really?
Not everyone has figured it out. More people need to do it.
Right.
Okay, so if you don't go to the meetup and there's no one with the yellow lanyards on,
Right.
I'm just cold entering the event, I don't know anyone, what's the best opener that I can give to start off a conversation?
The opener is hard because it's really, and this sounds a bit counterintuitive, but it's really not about the event. Like you should put in 80%, if you're going to a networking event for a specific purpose, you should put in most of the effort before the event and after the event, 80% of the effort. And so when you get to the event, the conversations happen naturally, you know who you need to meet, and after you can follow up. So it's hard. If you just go in cold and you see like, oh, like there's a networking event happening in like an hour, you're not gonna get much value from that unless you like work the room, and that's a skill that's really tough. And that's just really just positioning yourself and smiling and saying hello to anyone that comes into your orbit. Or a technique that works there is I tell people to go to the line. So go to the beverage line, go to the name tag line, because that's the highest traffic area where you're maximizing the amount of inbound you get.
Yeah. People are bored. That's what I did at an event at South by. I just stood next to the line the entire time. I didn't even barely go in because we had our QR codes outside the event. I was just going up to people. A few people that I had a good conversation with. I was like, you know what, you seem cool. Let me bring you to the front of the line. I skipped them, provided some value. Nice. I think as the event host, it's really interesting. You have a lot of power outside of the event, and so you can leverage that power to talk to more people. They're willing to speak to you. Wow, this is your event, et cetera, et cetera. Right. You give them a little favor of letting them skip the line. Now they're more intrigued to talk to you and provide value. I don't know if you've ever seen anything like that, but being the event host makes you have a lot of leverage to like easily get into those conversations.
The best way to build a relationship with someone is throw a 1,000 person event, have a VIP line, and invite them in VIP, and walk them in, put them in a room. They'll love you forever.
Yeah, there has to be any drinks or anything in there, just an empty VIP room.
Yeah, there should be.
I swear this is the VIP room.
There's like nothing. It's like white lights. Yeah,
that's awesome.
You just got to the States like a few years ago.
Yeah.
When Avante and I were starting to build Posh, we had zero connections in tech, and it's a very if you know world. No family members. It's very, there's a lot of closed off, like super private events and little VC circles and stuff. Do you ever think about how you can provide access to the 17-year-old hacker kid that's extremely brilliant and has a sick idea, but he has no way to break into tech or get a mentor that can help him figure out how to raise or find a team? Like, how do you provide access to someone like that to get into the space?
How do I provide access to a 17-year-old brilliant person who is underage and can't get into a bar?
Just an example demographic, but like anyone that's outside of that core tech circle.
Yeah.
Would you ever consider throwing like a more introductory event for people that don't even really understand the tech space, or do you just not think that's important?
I haven't thought about that. I think it's a really good point. I'm also a big believer in, I think brilliant people will find a way to meet other brilliant people.
So it's on them?
It's definitely on them, yeah. I don't know what an introductory event would look like, but there's only so much I could do in terms of like marketing and branding and distribution. It's sort of up to people. And when I first moved here, I like messaged hundreds, if not thousands, of people asking them to like get coffee. And so it's up to them. Like they need and that's how I got my. A lot of people don't know this, but that's how I got my Facebook and my Google job too. Wow. Just cold emailing people.
Wow.
So they need to figure out the art of the cold DM, because that's worked for me, and I think it should work for them too.
Totally. Why don't you break that down? Like, what's your basic cold DM strategy? What's the first sentence?
That's a tough one. It depends on the person. It depends if a person is like actually like famous, it's a different strategy versus if a person is just like senior and like important versus famous. If it's famous, if they're famous, you have to like read through 3 or 4 pieces of like literature or media that they've like their interviews, their books, and you have to like prove that you're someone worth meeting, and that's like storytelling. 2, you have to know their background really well and ask a really specific question. Like, I read your book and I noticed that in this certain section of your life, you made this specific decision. Why did you do that? And I want to ask that because it relates to what I'm doing right now. And you relate it back to yourself. And you have to be like considerate and kind and humble, and someone that they think you're worth meeting. And yeah, the final thing is you have to be specific. A lot of people reach out because they want to connect, That doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
You know, be like, can I get 15 minutes of your time over a call? I have this question, and do all the stuff I said earlier.
So a few sentences, lock in person time with them to meet, and then what's your next ask once you actually meet up?
I wouldn't say in person. So
Okay.
there's a hierarchy of like how big of a favor someone will do for you, and like the smallest thing is like they'll reply to your email. Like let's think like Mark Zuckerberg, like the smallest thing he'll do for someone, reply to your email, and then it's like 15-minute call, then it's like 30-minute Zoom call, and then it's IRL. IRL is like a huge favor for someone who doesn't know you. So the smallest thing you can ask for is like, can you respond to this question? It'll take you 10 seconds. And then you use that as a foot in the door to get to know them better and ask for a call.
You've had some really influential people at some of your events. They probably know, someone of the that provides similar value to a lot of the attendees. What do you think is the value that they receive from attending your event if they are, Mark Zuckerberg level or right below that?
It's really interesting because a lot of people that are really brilliant have spent their entire lives building a company or a product. And because they've done that, they've missed out on a lot of the social components, dating, friends. A really good analogy is chess players. You see the GMs, they don't really have social lives. They don't know how to do very basic things. Like I knew a GM, she coached me. She didn't know how to rent an apartment.
What's a GM, sorry?
Grandmaster.
Oh, Grandmaster, okay.
So she's brilliant at chess, but she's only done that her entire life. And the parallel is like a lot of these tech builders, they've ignored a huge aspect of their life that is crucial for living a fulfilling and happy life. And so they come to these events looking for friends, dates, interesting people. That's the value they get from it.
That's interesting. So you advise someone, even if obviously I think that there's definitely a big, there's a big camp of people that's like, you're raising a pre-seed, you need to be hunkered down in your sweaty, studio apartment with your 3 co-founders and just grinding away 24/7. You're definitely not in that camp, right? You think they need to be out meeting people as well?
I think they should be, if you're building, you should be building, but every once in a while, zoom out and look at what's around you and the same idea of like be present and realize you're in New York City and the most incredible city in the world. Have some fun and have a bit of balance. But I think if you're building a company, you should be in the garage building the company.
Facts.
Does having fun include alcohol? What are your thoughts on that?
I recently, as of 3 weeks ago, am trying to do 6 months without alcohol.
Wow.
And you're one of the people that inspired me to do it because you don't do it, right?
Since January 1.
Since January 1. All right.
3 months in.
It feels great.
It does.
It feels amazing. I actually feel like I took like a magic pill and I have like 30% more energy.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's insane. I think I could go the whole year, but I'm limiting myself to 6 months for now. We'll see what's up.
You had experience this summer.
Yeah.
That's dope. So a lot of great tidbits of advice for up and coming organizers, especially in the tech space. Got some speed round questions for you.
Cool.
So as quickly as you can go, you're in the middle of an event. What's the biggest oh fuck, this is not going well moment you've had or like some crazy thing happened?
I had this event in February, 300 people for Lunar New Year, and I had a miscommunication with the bar. They didn't realize that I would be bringing my own liquor, which, as you guys know, they'll charge you for that.
Yeah.
And so they were like, Andrew, we didn't realize you're bringing liquor. We're going to charge you this amount. And that ruined my entire night because my card was down. I'm like, I just lost 3 months of a paycheck or something like that.
Damn. Wow.
Sorry, 3 weeks or 3 paychecks. 3 paychecks.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was really pissed. That totally ruined my night.
Okay, so you go back in time and you meet Andrew that just got to the States. He doesn't know much about throwing an event. What's the biggest thing you tell him to watch out for?
This is more general advice, but don't work with someone that you wouldn't work with for 10 years. Don't work with them for a day if you wouldn't work with them for 10 years.
That's awesome.
So think about relationships from a long-term lens and don't be transactional and just look for the immediate reward.
That's awesome. Well, shell out your brand. We know the website is under construction, but where can people find you? How can they get to their first Andrew Yeung event?
Yeah, so I'm growing my Instagram. So right now, Instagram's the best place, at Andrew's Mixers. My Twitter is at Andrew Yeung, but instead of the EW and Andrew, it's U. And then my website is www.andrew.today.
So
And
I'll
are you
have
gonna
to
buy the blue
decode that.
check?
The blue, oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and we look up to you a lot. So thank you again. We'll
Appreciate
see you on
that.
the next hosted episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Andrew. All right.